Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Exit Is Now podcast. Back with your host, me, Scott Snider. Welcome back. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest who made a special trip in from Minnesota, Ben Utek. Talk about him all day. But the topic, and as if you guys have kind of followed the podcast with me, the whole podcast is really themed around how business owners are implementing value acceleration. And I can tell you, it's kind of overwhelming, right? You have all the traditional stuff, the accounting, the tax, the legal. You can have marketing and sales strategy and operation. And if you know me and know me well, you know that one of the most important parts, I think, to any business is people and culture. And I think one of the experts in this is Ben. And so Ben, I was looking at an introduction, and I was like, well, I mean, Ben is actually a pretty unique guy, right? So we got a chief culture officer, a growth officer, a Super Bowl champion, a Tony Dungy Uncommon Leader award, a speaker and author, a professional singer, and maybe the most, maybe one of your most proud, a family man.
Yes.
And so all kinds of good stuff that he can talk about. Today I want to focus in on what he's doing now as really a chief cultural officer. But welcome to the show, man, and thanks for coming.
Thanks, Scott, man.
Yeah, man.
Do you have a nickname? Do you have like a podcast nickname, like Scotty the something Snider? Like,
no,
what is it?
I mean,
it's got to be something there.
I mean, I'll throw out some embarrassing moments. If we had me and him had some dinner last night, and really starting to get to know each other.
Right.
I don't know if anybody knows this, but if any of my childhood, like grade school friends back in the old WWF wrestling days,
sure. Yes.
There was a wrestler, Scotty Too Hotty. So
Scotty
that's what I went by that, right? There's also Hot Rod Scott Snider. I don't think any of those stick with me anymore. I can see the people behind the glass looking at me like, what the heck are you even talking about? My dad calls me Doc. I don't know why. You could talk to him about that, and he's the only person that calls me Doc.
Interesting.
And then when I did college radio, so I was on 88.7 FM radio here in Cleveland.
Yeah.
On a show called Good Morning Rock. Got certified and everything to be this radio DJ in college. And I went by my grandpa's nickname, and I think he probably got it from like World War II.
Yeah.
He was called the Duke.
I
was the Duke on Good Morning Rock. No one actually knew my real name. So here's many names that you can pick from. Keep Doc with my dad.
Yep.
You can call me Duke, Hot Rod,
I like Duke.
Scotty Too Hot, any one of those. But
Duke's pretty good.
Yeah, the Duke. So yeah. So anyways. I wanted to have you in to talk about culture. I think,
yes.
And as we were talking pre-show, for me, and it was like a recent business lesson, to be totally honest with you. It was an output of COVID for me. Like I've always been like a people and a relationship, and I'd like to think that I always knew the importance of culture. But then when you kind of go through it, like we had to do in this pivot of the pandemic, you kind of like it really challenges your core values. It challenges
absolutely
who you are as a person, both professionally and personally. And I think having this group of people at EPI, from a business owner's perspective, come together from a cultural and a purpose and a meaning was absolutely critical. So, and I love the stuff that you talk about when I first got introduced to you.
Yeah.
You talk about culture as a journey stands out to me. You talk about this culture of champion leadership and dynamic communication. And you talk about, I think specifically, culture can be decided, designed, deployed, and directed.
Yeah,
so
4
can
Ds.
you just talk to me about that as we introduce culture?
Man. Well, culture has been so much a part of my entire athletic career.
Right.
Culture in sports is just synonymous, right, with excellence and with fundamentals and technique. Everything that goes into a winning team revolves around culture. And obviously the crossover for that into the corporate world is significant.
Yeah.
And so, to have been on a Super Bowl championship team by a coach, a Hall of Fame coach, Tony Dungy, who won a world championship built on servant leadership, it brought a whole new perspective around the high impact objective nature that culture can be when you take the time to decide it. Yeah. Right? Because kind of rule of thumb in culture is you're always going to have one by design or default.
Right.
So why not design it? So the first is the choice. You got to choose to make culture objective, right? And those 4 Ds are really just designed to give a strategy, a template around the radical truth that culture is material. It's something that you can actually build an entire system around to practice.
Yep.
And the practicing, which is everything that sports is built around, the practicing is what actually makes culture something that you can develop within people and distribute across an entire organization.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. This morning, even at breakfast, you were talking about this like objective and subjective versions of culture, and how if you do decide, design, deploy, and direct, it actually becomes, like to your point, a practice, and instead of the kind of maybe subjectivity of it, becomes a little bit more objective. But I love that you kind of talked about a little bit about the NFL career, because I think that for all of us that I was telling you, whether you're a sports person or not, understanding Tony Dungy's approach to team and culture and leadership is, I think, whether it's in a sport, a nonprofit organization, a church, or a business.
Yep.
I think it seems like he's had a lot of, influence on you. Tony, from my studies, right, was somebody that felt all people were leaders. Mm-hmm. Something that really impacted me too when we had, the 25 people here, whether on that corporate totem pole of where you stand, you're a leader in your own way. It's about relationships. It's about purpose. And you have a unique story about your draft story that you told me. I'd love for you to share that about Tony, because I think it really builds into it.
100%. And it's, my favorite Tony Dungy book is Uncommon, right? And that was his entire platform was, how do you live your life as an uncommon leader? How do you build an uncommon culture? Uncommon really being defined as going against the normal, going against what is a typical flow, and stepping outside of that comfortable space and doing something in an uncommon way that can have an uncommon impact, positive impact on the human condition of other people. Right. So not only did he believe that everybody was everybody was a leader, but that everybody matters.
Yeah.
That people matter.
Yeah.
That the most important part of every business are the people that are a part of that business. And if that's true, then we have to pour into that human condition. We have to find ways to create workplace environments that allow them to thrive and allow them to walk into their purpose as a person. Yeah, and that's really critical, right? So that's what he lived out on a consistent basis. And I was the example of that, as we discussed the other night, where basically, my senior year in college, I was up for preseason All-American. I was up for the Mackey Award for the country's top tight end, all Big Ten tight end, and I had this debilitating injury. 3/4 of the way through the year, I ended up tearing abdominal muscles off the pubic bone. It was intense. It was intense. Just saying it still makes me kind of because it just sounds gross. But it was a serious injury, and I went from being a potential first-round draft pick to not getting drafted at all, and it was just an incredibly difficult time. And
it had to be really deflating for you.
Yeah, completely deflating. Went to the NFL Combine. I couldn't perform because I was still injured. I got red flagged by all of the team doctors. Nobody wanted to touch me. I was too much of a health risk. And I went through 2 of the most embarrassing draft days of my life where my name did not get called. And I thought it was over. And I remember driving up to my agent's office holding back tears because all I had left was some slim chance that maybe someone would take a broken player. And 2 months before that, as I shared last night, I was speaking at an event on the University of Minnesota campus. And Tony Dungy is also a University of Minnesota alumni. He was also a Golden Gopher. And I got up to speak and introduce none other than Tony Dungy. And so I get up in front of 700 alumni, and I just say, hey, Coach, if you really care about the Gophers, if you're a true alumni, you're going to draft me in the upcoming draft. And he was gracious enough to respond and said, Ben, we drafted a first-round tight end last year. We're not in need of tight ends. And then he stepped back from the mic and he paused as if though he was being downloaded something. He came back and he said, you know what? I'm going to make a promise to you. If for some reason you slip through the cracks, I'll be the first person to call. Yeah. And everybody clapped and kind of went in one ear and out the other for me, because the chances of that were slim to none. And so fast forward, again, don't get drafted. And I'm sitting across the table from my agent. My dad's next to me. And the only option left is the free agent market, the leftover players that didn't get drafted. And the free agent market opens. 5 seconds later, their phone on the middle of my agent's desk rings, and I pick it up, and who do you think it was?
Yeah.
Tony Dungy.
He's calling your agent's office.
Tony Dungy was the first person to call. Like the promise he made months ago in front of 700
like you just
people.
Got chills, you know?
Yeah.
You're just like, man.
He followed through on this belief that your word is your bond, right? That a man of integrity does the right thing, and that was a part of the Colts Way culture, and he was living it out. Now, what's extraordinary about that is it wasn't just him; it was our Hall of Fame general manager, Bill Polian, calling to say, we know how talented you are when you're healthy. We believe we know what this injury is. We have the top doctor in the country.
Yeah,
we're going to send you there to get surgery, to get fixed and healthy. We don't even want you to think about playing the first year.
Yeah.
Just get better, and we'll pay you as though you're a playing rookie. And here's a signing bonus just to know that we are going to put some skin in the game. If that, and then 3 years later, Scott, I'm a starting tight end on a Super Bowl championship team. None of that happens without going through the trials of injury, but coming across an uncommon leader who has chosen to build an uncommon culture that places people first and views them as an opportunity to be transformative.
I think so. When we get into this culture and people discussion in 2023, right? I think that maybe it's the new generations of leaders that we see, right? Like the people coming into the workforce, the people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Maybe just the generational characteristics are different. Thus, the way people want to be led is different.
Yeah.
But this is like the great debate, right? It's I think a lot of the times, certainly in large corporations and even in small companies like ours, these 25 or 30, 35 people that you might have really become like a number, right? Like operational efficiency, revenue generation, lean businesses, lead generation, all of these kind of play, just boom, 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 push out these numbers.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie to you, Ben, like when we were pivoting through COVID, it was kind of like that for us.
Oh, for sure.
Like, and I didn't know what you don't know as an owner, I guess, right? But it was very, I would say, if you sat with any of my team here, it was very metrics and number driven. What I was writing down as you were talking about Dungy is that it was like a very humanized approach to culture, leadership, and people. And one of the first lessons I learned when we started to transform who we were, rewrite the core values, investigate culture, was this simple concept of, it's the best way to say it, right, is if you have a crappy day at home, right, like your kids are sick or you had an argument with your wife or a death in the family,
right,
and you got to come in at 8 or 9 a.m. to go to work, you're probably bringing some of that to work and thus probably having a bad day.
Yes.
And the opposite, right? If I have a tough day at the office, then I got to go coach my son's team or go home for around the dinner table.
Yep.
I'm probably a little on edge and a guy that you don't want to be around with. And I that's just to me the human flow, right? I get it. But what you hear a lot, or I think maybe what you used to hear a lot, is like business is business and personal is personal. Don't bring that crap into the office.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, though, because me and you are both human, man. Like, if you have a crappy day and I got to work alongside you on a big strategy or initiative, or we're banging phones, selling stuff, I think that there's a human nature to it to say, 100%. Like, hey, Ben, man, like, what's wrong today?
Yeah. Deloitte just put out a really interesting article on workplace well-being, and it really talks about the radical importance of having interpersonal relationships, of having a workplace that just in nature is more familial.
Yeah,
right. Where you have an invested degree of kind of relational efficacy with the people that you work with, because when you are willing to be more vulnerable, you create greater values such as commitment and loyalty and trust,
right,
that are all radically important to the operation of a successful business.
Totally. Did you see some of that in the locker room too when you were playing football? Was it like that?
Well, the locker room was. See, sports is very unique that way because there's no HR. There's no HR in sports.
Right. Yeah, sure.
So the things that can be talked about, the things that can be, the way in which people can be spoken to, everything has extremes, right? Extremes. And one of those extremes that was very positive about being in the Dungy locker room was this idea of family. And I remember sharing this with you early on when we started to get to know each other, was that very first team meeting that I had in Indianapolis with the Colts, where Tony Dungy comes in and he says, my number one job here is to build a family. Right? If your only reason for being here is a game, then you've missed the mark.
Yeah,
I remember like looking around going, wait, what did he?
Yeah, we all.
Wait a second. What did he
now.
just say?
Yeah, right.
So family and the acronym for family, and you know, I've heard our new Gopher coach PJ Fleck say this a lot. Family. The acronym for family in football is "Forget about me, I love you."
Right.
Right. So it's this idea about the power of selflessness.
Right.
And selflessness only comes through qualities like humility and empathy and grace and things that exist within all the relationships that we have. And if you can build and develop those qualities, then they transfer over into your performance on the playing field or your performance in your role in an organization. And so, yes, that was definitely part of the Colts way. And grace is the to act with kindness or clemency. So to take a grace approach is not a soft skill. It's actually very challenging to be able to approach a situation where you know that you're not going to be able to do things perfectly, right? Sure. I mean, like you said, I guarantee you everybody in that locker room has a self-confidence score of 100%, right? They're just and aggression and dominance. And so you get into those into the rooms with those heavy leadership and competitive personalities. And it's a challenge to come in and to teach a group of men like that values and non-negotiable beliefs surrounding humility. And, you know, I mean, I talk about empathy all the time when I talk about what it means to be a great listener, because, you know, to be a great listener means you have to put others first. You have to pause on what you're thinking and what you want to say, 100%. And you give someone else the stage first. And that takes a choice. It takes a choice to practice a belief of the importance of empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of someone speaking, right? And those are the qualities, though, where even if you can move the dial a little bit, even if you can develop, you know, a typically highly confident individual, how to pause, that in and of itself can create more meaningful relationships that have a positive impact on the organizational culture.
Absolutely. So I want to dive more into culture and business. We're going to get back into kind of what Ben's doing here just after a short break. So stick with us, and we'll be right back.
Walking to Destiny was written to arm business owners and their advisors with the knowledge and understanding needed to recognize their potential, execute growth tactics, and harvest the wealth locked inside a business. Originally written in 2016 by the creator of the Value Acceleration Methodology, Chris Snider, Walking to Destiny 2.0 features a fresh and evolved look into the proven system to maximize value, grow income, and build a business that can be run without you, even if you never plan to leave. Discover how to align your business, personal, and financial goals. Distinguish between your business's attractiveness and readiness to transition. Measure the value of your intangible assets that likely contribute 80% of your company's value. Adopt a process to measure your results every 90 days. Walking to Destiny is the foundation for the Exit Planning Institute's Certified Exit Planning Advisor Credentialing Program. More than 5,000 advisors hold the CEPA designation, the world's leading exit planning credential. Grab your copy of Walking to Destiny 2.0 by visiting www.wtddownloads.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. Wanted to just dive back into this culture conversation. So I think that we did a kind of a good job of kind of laying out the foundation.
Right.
So now let's talk about this transition, right? So fast forward 10-something years.
Yeah.
Now you're a chief culture officer working with business owners and their teams, working with what I actually think is pretty unique and something that we don't talk a lot about in the EPI community, which is this integration and optimization of companies, so more mergers.
Sure.
So I think it would be kind of difficult. We could go down a whole rabbit hole here.
Sure.
I think it would be difficult to buy a company of another 30 people and then integrate it into the EPI culture, because as we talked about in our kind of first segment, like this concept of family, and we work and practice hard on culture and development. But before we dive down, let's kind of start at the beginning too. So kind of looking at business. So nowadays, getting out of the locker room, coming into the business owner's company.
Yeah.
What are some of the kind of foundational things that a business owner must know in culture? What kind of stands out to you?
Wow, what a question. Well, listen, it didn't happen overnight for me. I walked out of that locker room going, okay, something radical is here. And my degree was in public speaking. My dad was a pastor. I fell in love with speaking, watching him develop a message to positively improve people's lives every week. Yeah. And I thought, gosh, I mean, I was never drawn towards the pulpit, but I felt like, what a very powerful opportunity to use words to have a transformative effect. So that's how I got into this whole thing, Scott. As I started speaking, and I got into the Fortune 500 community, talking about this radical approach to building championship culture, some consulting, executive coaching. And then, like you said, in the last 2 years, I've had a chance to really become a practitioner of this. And just in the course of building some deep and meaningful relationships, was brought on as a chief culture officer in a really profound company built on a purpose-driven servant leadership platform in True North. And True North M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and Sunbelt Business Advisors are some of the companies that I'm doing this culture work with. So I got brought in to be a practitioner in the financial services industry, right, where exit planning is critical.
Prominent.
Right. And to your point, this radical gap or challenge that exists, and you can look at any major consulting group, and they'll tell you one of the main reasons why M&A fails is because of a lack of culture integration. Right? Because here's the thing, and you just talked about this this idea. It's not that you're merging. It's not only that you're just merging two organizations. It's that you're merging human beings, that are all coming to work today with unique and different, non-negotiable intrinsic beliefs. Right. And if the organizations have not done a good job of creating systems around how to practice that and keep it sustainable, and if they have not done a good job of creating a process in which to bring those two unique different cultures together, then of course you're going to have tension. Right. And if you don't have the right people or processes in place in order to manage that, then oftentimes it can self-destruct. Right. And so how does culture impact successful M&As? Yeah. It does it by really giving a sound platform on culture integration, and that's critical.
Talk to me about your organizational, I think it's called your organizational creed. It's
something
that you came up, kind of created.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to this, for me, I think that sticks too. And I told you this story when we were going through this big transition, right? Where frankly, my dad, who's more of a very metrics-driven guy and wants to understand the return on investment of whatever we're spending money on.
Right.
And we came out of 2020. We came through 2020, pivoted the company in 45 days, worked our asses off, and really then stabilized the company and experienced some growth in new products and new ways of doing things. And I said this at the summit, the exit planning summit last year. I kind of paused at some point during that year and said, where I was really excited because I was like, we just kind of won a battle. Mm-hmm. And I looked around at all of our people and I was like, oh man, like I see people that I thought should be positive are kind of negative. People are deflated. People are tired. Yeah. Maybe there's something wrong here, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe there's something that needs to change. And I just go back to, how do I measure the success of the program? How do I keep it implemented? How do I take those core values that you put up on the wall and make them work? And you mentioned this organizational creed. Can you just talk about that? I think it's important.
Well, a part of kind of my transition over the last couple of years and stepping into the C-suite as a culture implementer has also been partnering and becoming becoming a partner in Behavioral Essentials, which is a profound technology company and professional services company that focuses not only on using assessments, behavioral assessments to help a company hire better, develop their leaders better, and culture better, but also by providing a menu of organizational culture development and leadership development services. And a part of that is this organizational creed. And it was interesting because it's a very personal story for me. You know, every company has a mission, vision, value statement, right? That's just traditional.
Right.
And I remember thinking to myself as I began building out these programs, you know, why do I value anything? You know, when I talk about it, you know, or when a company talks about integrity as their value, my first question, because I want to learn, is why? What does integrity mean, and why do you actually value it? And most of the time, almost every time, the answer started with, I believe.
Yeah.
I believe. Interestingly enough, do you watch the show Ted Lasso?
No, but I know what you're talking about.
Well, Ted Lasso, it's this hit award-winning show because it revolves around the building of championship culture, and his entire culture is #believe, right?
Okay.
And so bear with me on this because it's really cool. So I started realizing that whenever people are talking about the things that are foundationally most important in their lives, they use the word believe. Mm-hmm. They don't use the word, they don't say I value, they say I believe, which empowers their value. And then I was doing interestingly enough, I was doing a podcast with a neuroscientist, and she said, it's so interesting that you've chosen to build culture around a belief system because we know physiologically in the brain where values are stored. We know where the brain stores values. But here's where it gets really cool. The only reason why values in the brain stay where they're stored is because they're surrounded by their beliefs. Beliefs, in essence, are the foundation of values. Beliefs hold the value in place. So the only reason why you can say that you value something is because you have to believe something about it first. And so I thought, then why aren't we doing that? Is it because we're so afraid to use a word that has a spiritual connotation? No, we shouldn't be. Like, it's the foundation of who we are as humans. It's when we believe something about our families, about our politics, about our business. It doesn't matter when we say believe. So that's where the creed came from. A creed is a set of beliefs that guide the behaviors and actions of people.
Yeah.
And I'm just, when I discovered that, I remember I was in my garage, Scott, and I'm literally cleaning my garage, and I'm thinking to myself,
you had one of these aha moments.
Yes, I'm like, what is going to be the difference maker? And the word creed popped into my mind, and I thought, Apollo Creed from the Rocky movies?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
But then hey Siri, define creed.
You're right.
And that's what she said, and I was like, oh my gosh, if that wasn't a fate moment, or I call them God incidences, if that wasn't one of those moments that just crystallized to me what I want to help companies do. So we use our assessment platform. We help determine the behaviors that are reflective of a company's aspirational culture. So now we've got a benchmark for their culture, and the creed is the physical manifestation of that aspirational culture. So we can take a company's, what they would typically call their core values or principles, and what we do is we turn that into a materialized, training manual. It becomes the what, why, and how of each one of those beliefs, and it goes deep so that there's no gray area. Right. It's a black and white culture that objectively identifies what we believe, why we believe it, and how we expect you to behave it. And the how is the secret sauce.
And so it's also, you can kind of evaluate it then, I would assume, right?
Yes.
That's the stuff I was talking about. Like, well, how do I tie some metrics or some tangible stuff around, I guess, what's considered a lot of time culture building and purpose and core values? It's almost like these intangibles. How do I actually draw some results and evaluate the performance of my culture?
And I think that's where you get a lot of the eye roll a lot of the eye roll from executive leadership,
Yeah.
over the past. Everybody talks about it, but like you said, there's no getting around the fact that business is transactional. It has to be.
Yeah.
Right. And so spreadsheets, I was talking to your dad just today, and he was saying how much he can learn and know about a company just by looking at its P&L sheet.
Statement. Yeah.
So there's a lot of truth in that. So you want to. There's always balance to this. So it's kind of bringing in the human side, the relational side, to the transactional side, and wanting to make sure that you're spending enough time on both to make it more meaningful. And that's where that evaluation comes in. Is these assessment platforms can help you do it.
Yeah, I do. I think it's something that's actually quite unique. So like a couple of us did it here at EPI to kind of get used to it and learn more about what you're doing with business owners. And I think that I describe it as this like very simplistic tool meets this very complex results, right? It's probably like out of all these assessment tools that athletes do, that we do as business owners and leaders, people investing in culture, it's very simple, so you're not taking a lot of the owner's time.
Right.
You're not taking a lot of the executive's time.
No.
But the results are
pretty
like
amazing.
You're like kind of mind blown at how much
amazing.
You can get out of this simplistic process.
Yeah.
It's actually a pretty complex set of answers.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting, right, to marry now, if you go all the way back to the start of the show, these early kind of NFL career moments with Tony Dungy, learning about culture and family, and now you're taking those inspirations and this kind of the mark that he made on you.
Yeah.
Adding your own stuff through your life experiences.
Right.
In the NFL, post NFL.
Right.
And then now marrying it with a company that you own that is like science and data driven. And if you read about it, I think it's pretty interesting. You take an even, I think, a different and maybe even deeper approach, and going back to this kind of humanized, like it's almost all about let's make the person better first.
Right.
Then once we've made that person more aware and better and purposeful, they add to this overall culture that you have. So talk to the science. Behind it.
That's Behavioral Essentials is special because of Rick Braden.
Okay.
Rick Braden
Founder.
is the founder.
Yeah.
33 years, clinical therapist, family therapist, who felt called to be the eHarmony for business. That's really where this technology platform came out of. But Rick's and the mission of the company, the mission of Behavioral Essentials is to come alongside suffering.
I know, right? It's such a unique approach.
It's really
right?
a unique approach. It's to get to the root of behavior and performance, to come alongside, to heal suffering, and to help as many people and companies as possible. But the way that starts is very unique, right? Because that's saying something. That's compassion.
Well, that's from like a total. That's not business at all. You're coming from an individual standpoint. Let's help suffering.
Yes, what you have to, because the things we don't know about the team members that walk into work every single day that's affecting their performance. And so how do we come alongside organizational teams and employees and really provide a transformative platform? Because as I have been mentored by some of the best in the chief people officer industry, Tony Bridwell is one of these individuals. Tony taught me that whenever possible, you always want to try to take a transformative approach versus a conformative approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right now, there's always times where you're going to have to have a conformative conversation because people we're not perfect and we're going to make mistakes and they need to be dealt with. But the reality is that if you can take a transformative approach to change a mindset, now you get buy-in. Now you get true commitment from that team member in order to begin practicing what your hopes are for. And that ultimately is what guides Behavioral Essentials. But it's been exciting to bring it into financial services. We rolled this out at True North M&A and Sunbelt, and so we now for this company, which is already doing things differently because of the way they approach putting people first. Well, now we have benchmarked their M&A advisor role. We have benchmarked their broker role based upon top performers, right? So now every new team member that comes in goes through that assessment process, and we determine, and prioritize hiring through that.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you use it on the front end to hire the
right away?
people?
Use it on the front end. You use the coaching reports to develop those people as leaders, and you can even develop people into those benchmarks. And then really the sweet spot for me is the fact that we can benchmark the culture. So not only when we're hiring, not only can we hire against a role benchmark that prioritizes top talent, but now we can see, are they a culture fit? Is this somebody that shares the same non-negotiable belief and behavioral system that we do, so we can hit the ground running?
Yeah.
Right. And that to me is something that financial services needs. It's something that M&A really needs, because if we can bring a technology like this into a process to really help find the right buyer,
right? Yeah.
To really help increase the value of a company, right? If we can integrate a tool that over the course of 12 to 24 months can increase the value of a company because it allows you to hire better people, which allows for the right role, which increases retention and lowers turnover.
Right.
I mean, these all are a financial value add to the organization and might have an impact on sale price, which is really
absolutely right. For anybody that's a certified exit planning advisor listening to the show, we teach those 4 intangible capitals, right? You're probably talking about this last night with my dad too.
Yes.
Where, that just take the 2 out of the 4, just take the human capital and the social capital, right? The people and the culture. And I go back to making these kind of intangible things very tangible and measurable. Naturally, you're going to drive more value into the business, right? Because you're going to retain more people. They're going to operate better as a team. You're likely going to get more done.
Yep.
Honestly, there's no way, if we didn't do what we did in 2020, that we could have grown in the way that we've grown.
Yes.
Maintained. So like when we talk about growth, I think a lot of companies say, I grew top line revenue, but I didn't grow at the same rate in my profit, right? So I'm basically saying I sold a lot of stuff, but I sold a lot of not unprofitable stuff.
Right.
Or I grew in revenue, I grew in profit, and I lost a bunch of people along the way at the expense of people.
Yeah.
And so I just think that when you can get the right people in the right seats and then be able to measure it, of course you're going to drive value, but then you have this proof, right? Like I can show you exactly how it was. Last thing I want to talk to you about in culture, as you mentioned earlier, like this aspirational culture, like where do you want to go, who do you want to be? And I read in whether it was on your website or one of your TED Talks, you talk about journey or culture as a journey too. Mm. So is it something that this social capital, this culture, is it something that you ever achieve, or is it like this always be learning, ever evolving process that you're after?
Yes.
Yes, and we could just end the show, right?
No, it is a living organism.
It is, right?
It is
That's
alive.
What I've learned too.
It is alive, and that's why when, like for example, when you do the assessment, let's say you do the assessment and you put together a leadership development plan to, improve on some of your behavioral attributes. If you put time into actually doing that and take the assessment again in 6 months,
right?
You should see movement on those attributes, right? And so it is this kind of living culture is this living, breathing entity that it's really a cycle. So at Behavioral Essentials, we kind of call it our infinity cycle, and it's constantly evolving and adapting, but it still follows kind of an objective foundational system. And our system is Culture Sync, Culture System, and Culture Summit. Culture Sync is where you're creating alignment across all leadership. You want to create that synchronicity, right?
Yeah.
So bringing leadership together, determining your non-negotiables is the beginning of that, because culture is the leader's choice. And so it's true in any company.
Yep.
And so you build alignment first around the practicing of a non-negotiable belief system. That alignment then is what heads into the culture system section. The systems is every single process you can think of in order to develop and implement, a culture program.
Yeah.
And that system alone will never, it'll never stop. You'll never stop adding to it, subtracting from it, adapting it, right? That will always be living. And then you move into that culture summit. The summit is really identifying where are you on the mountain. Your goal is to reach the summit.
Yeah, right.
Okay? And so that's your evaluation moment where once you've created alignment, once you've started to build and practice the systems, then you evaluate where you are on the summit.
Yeah.
And once you get to, it doesn't matter if you're at the middle, the base, or at the summit. Each one of the sections on the evaluation mountain is going to give you a different way of responding to go back to culture sync.
And you move up and down that mountain. Right, you take a couple steps forward, and then 6 months later, you're like, I fell a little back, right? So
the ultimate goal is obviously to reach the summit and then to stay there, right? But in order to stay there, you have to constantly be evaluating what is next that needs to be in alignment. Right. And then once you determine what is next to be in alignment, you go back to creating systems around keeping those. So it's constantly moving like this, right? Yeah. You have to think. Innovation has to be a part of culture now, 100%. but it can still remain an objective entity. Yeah. It just means that you're you never. I call it the culture drip. You're never taking your finger off of the culture. You always want that drip, that consistent attention to detail in order to really have the greatest impact.
Cool. So stick with us. I want to talk to Ben next about kind of keeping the momentum, if you will, once we've kind of engaged in this journey up to the summit. So stick with us. We'll be back just in a couple of minutes.
Get ready to uncover innovative solutions, build deeper relationships, and share transformational experiences at the Exit Planning Summit this May in Scottsdale, Arizona. The summit is the world's largest exit planning-centric event, bringing together professional advisors and their teams from around the globe. It is the premier conference for people committed to working with business owners, accelerating business value, aligning personal and financial strategies for the business owners, and collaborating with the top professionals in the market today. The transformative experience does not stop when the sessions end. Immerse yourself in a distinctive lifestyle experience that transcends expectation. Join us at the magnificent Five Diamond Resort, the Phoenician, the premier luxury hotel in Scottsdale. Immerse yourself in breathtaking views, impeccable service, and unparalleled amenities. Curate a distinctive resort experience infused with a retreat-like ambiance that transforms your well-being. Learn more and reserve your spot now at www.exitplanningsummit.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Exit is Now podcast. So we've been talking about culture, sharing some stories about both of our kind of careers and experience. You mentioned to me, Ben, I think a pretty interesting story about a 400-person organization that you were working with.
Yeah.
And I think now, if I'm listening to the show, I'm an owner of a company, an executive. If you're not bought in yet, right? Culture, I think, is key. But now, and for me, right, I've always been a small business owner, so I'm always very fascinated by these huge corporations with hundreds or thousands of employees. Once I've dove into culture, and again, I love that infinity thing that you were just talking about before the break, and I'm venturing up that summit. How do I keep that momentum? How do you work with these large organizations to have this, frankly, drastic change, and then keep it building year over year over year?
Well, listen, everything that we believe comes out of what we call the what, why, and how of the non-negotiable system, right? Okay. So we want to always remove the gray area by answering those three questions in everything that we put into our culture system. So what do you believe, why do you believe it, and how do you behave it? And we want to dive deep into each of those sections. Now the how section, right? This is the critical section. Okay, this is the differentiator, right? Okay. Simon Sinek talks about the power of why, because it's the story and it's essential. The story is what Story is what changes the mindset. Story is what connects emotionally to the human condition and allows people to really experience change. You know what I mean? In order to go practice it. So story is essential. But if you don't have a system that distributes a game plan, right? Just go to the NFL.
Yeah.
If you saw, I mean, you've seen the coaches on the sideline. They have these huge sheets, and you can't. If you could just see it, like it has every single play that you could possibly imagine for every single position that you could find yourself on a field, right? For every down.
Yeah. Right.
And so that game plan is essential, and the practicing all week of that game plan is what allows us to go and perform. It's no different in culture, right? The how is what's critical. And that's where you're able to take that momentum and sustain it, is by working hard at developing the systems in which to practice, right? And then always learning, always staying in that mode of innovation and creativity to find alignment in order to create and build more systems. And companies that have a larger employee base that are taking this seriously really understand that in order to get the results they want, they have to put time and money into their people, into the development of their people. So, for example, this construction company that we're working with, this CEO cares so deeply about the development of his people that we've built out an entire leadership development coaching plan for every single employee. So the scope of work is huge. So over the next year or two, every employee in that company, hundreds, are going to have the opportunity to be coached and developed by experienced and certified leadership development coaches. Right. So it's so much more than just the value system. We've built out their entire organizational creed. We've assessed all of their talent. We've built out role and culture benchmarks for their entire company, so that from the minute you begin to hire it's the entire succession plan of the employee. Hiring, developing them as leaders, developing them within the culture of the organization, and to when they sail off into the sunset, having a great career, right? That's the goal of that, and all of those combined really define at least how at Behavioral Essentials how we do it within an organization.
Well, man, it's been a great conversation.
It's great.
Was saying, like, we're probably in like 10 more of these because we can go all over the place.
I'll be back next week.
Okay.
If you're buying dinner again, I'll be back next week.
I will buy dinner. You can eat the whole cow, the potatoes, the lobster.
Well, the trilogy.
The trilogy's coming next.
Yeah, that is the whole cow.
It is. So, in all honesty, I think he's got. If you don't know Ben, you certainly should. Outside of business, I was telling you at the break that one of my goals this year is I always find myself reading a ton of business books, especially in our industry today, books about, get the right multiple for your business or lean operations.
Oh, sure, the Toyota way.
Right? Not that they're not motivational or not practical, but I'm trying to read non-business books and challenge myself to do that.
It's a good idea.
So when I first met you, I was like, oh, this guy's got a book. So I'm going to go buy his book. And I did it just because I liked you, right? And I was like, dude, this guy's got a lot of cool stuff. So then I started reading his book, and it's called Counting the Days While My Mind Slips Away, and you have all kinds of stuff in this book. And what I realized when I started reading it, it's almost like a love letter to your wife and your daughters.
Yeah.
And so I will let you go on and go grab that book because it's an unbelievable motivational story.
Yeah.
And I thought, frankly, you're so authentic and honest in it. I think it took a lot of courage to just throw it all out there.
It was a tough write.
It was a tough write. Yeah, man. Well, thanks for coming on. And for all of our guests, you can check out all our podcasts on our YouTube channel. You can check it out on all the regular Spotify's, Apple, and all that good stuff. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you soon.